right. So, welcome to the Legacy Leaders Lounge, and I have a wonderful guest for us this evening, Rodney Lawson. He comes to us as a TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, starting his own consulting, coaching business. He's been working in the HR space, I believe, for
Uh,
several
corporate
decades, right?
world. Yeah,
Yep.
corporate world, I would say.
Corporate world, HR space,
Mhm. Many
and
different roles: sales,
yeah,
operations. Yeah, I've done a
yes.
lot of
Yeah, he has an extensive background in all these categories. But the thing that really intrigued me about Rodney, and I met Rodney probably, let's say, maybe 6 months ago or maybe longer than that, but we met virtually. We've never met in
Yes.
person. Our relationship has been like this. It has been online. We met in a mastermind, and I've gotten to know Rodney and see him kind of grow in this new vision and dream that he has. And one of the things that's really intrigued me about Rodney is his faith. And that's one of the topics we're going to dive into is faith and leadership. And there we'll probably touch on a few other things as we're here together, but this is what this episode is going to be all about. And we're just want to dive in. And Rodney, I just want to say it's exciting to have you here with us this evening together. And one of the things I'd like for you to kind of start out with us, and since we're talking about faith and leadership, okay,
Hmm.
um, just kind of give us a brief, like, give me a brief big picture view, and I'll use a really Christian term. How about that?
Okay.
Give
Okay.
us a big picture view of your testimony, a little bit about your story. What is that story, your faith story? Tell that with us, share that with us.
Wow. First of all, Miles, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate the platform. I appreciate the exposure, and I appreciate what you are doing.
Mm.
I've been on probably 20 to 25 podcasts within the past cyclical year. And this is the first one that I've got to talk about in this form where we're talking about our faith and our spirituality. And we might have touched on it in some other podcasts, but with it being a headline, this one is dear to my heart. And let me share why. You talked about testimony. My faith extends all the way back to my childhood and my earliest memories. I always remember believing in a higher power, believing in God. Even though my parents were not avid churchgoers, it was just something that was instilled into me from a very early age that I just felt that the way the universe operates, with everything being in complete balance. When you think about how the moon revolves around the earth, how the earth revolves around the sun, and how we rotate, like there's a push and pull for everything.
Hmm.
There's a yin and a yang, a black and a white, all of these different forces coming together for this complete balance. And in my mind, and what I view, there has to be an exceptional high power to keep that in orbit. I mean, these are things that we don't even think about, right? And so,
Hmm.
so to have this balance, right, this complete balance for us on Earth, there has to be a higher power, and that's just been my thought process all my life. And I will say that my life have taken some turns for the good and
Hmm.
some turns for the not so good.
Yeah.
While I grew up in a household of um, uh, two parents, father and a mom, my father unfortunately suffered from a lot of items that stemmed from his childhood. He was an avid drinker, so he was an alcoholic. He
Mm.
was abusive. He was, I would say, narcissistic. And a lot of these tendencies as a child, when you're growing up in a household of that nature, your ACE or your adverse childhood experience
Hmm.
becomes something that will determine a lot about you, right? And in my case, what my father did, it made me what I would call, or what one would call, a rejection overcomer.
Yeah.
Today, I say I'm a rejection conqueror
No.
because I
Okay.
used to be a rejection patient, right?
Yep.
Now, what does that look like? So it looks like someone who is a perfectionist because they're afraid to put anything out for fear of people rejecting it.
Hmm.
It looks like being triggered by certain things that people might say or might do for fear of rejection. And when those things happen, we resort to one of three things. We um, run from it, stick our head in the sand and ignore it, or we fight it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I got from my father is to fight with his,
Mm.
violent personality, set, such. And so there are times in my life where I was placed in different situations where um, I know I didn't react the right way. And there are
Mhm.
times when I know I did react the right way. But all of those things made me who I am today.
Yeah.
And I look at it as, God placed me in certain situations to give me certain skill sets. So these things that I got, um, these skill sets, I would say, this philosophy, my spirituality, all of this stuff, um, took me to a place of resiliency.
Mm.
At a very early age, I jumped into the corporate world and I excelled rapidly up the corporate ladder. To give you an example, by the age of 23, 24 years old, I was already over a six-figure salary. And
Oh,
this
wow.
was, yeah, this was in the late 80s,
Yeah.
early 90s.
Yeah.
So I was
That's a lot
doing
of money back
extremely
then.
well. I know. I
Wish
was
you had
doing
that
extremely
same.
well. Yeah.
If you compare that to today's economy, we need to do some math on that one.
Yeah. The first corporate job I stepped into, Miles, I spent 14 years there. And within the first 12 years, I was promoted 14 times. I went
Mm.
from the lowest level part time sales rep over the telephone to running their most complex operational facility, over 687 employees from over 50 different countries around the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in 12 years. Uh, and it was exciting. And that resilience, I say, comes from what I feel like God had given me, the skill sets, because of my childhood upbringing,
Hmm.
right? So you see, I didn't want to be like my father. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I didn't want to have our gas and electricity cut off,
Yeah.
in the wintertime. We lived in Buffalo, New York, where it's cold at, right?
Mm.
You can't stay in your house when it happens, And it wasn't because my dad wasn't earning any money.
Hmm.
He had a solid job working for a major automobile plant. It's just that he would, take his paycheck every week and he would go and drink and gamble it up.
Yeah. Wow.
And we would face certain things, and that's where I developed my kind of resentment towards
Hmm.
that, because I would see my friends having things, and I knew my dad made more, but we didn't necessarily experience more.
Yeah.
And it took me years and years to get over that. But that's what helped develop my resilience. Like when I got in the corporate world, I wanted to excel because of that. And I will say this: the person that you're looking at today was not the person that started in the corporate world. I talked with a lot of broken English. I used a lot of colloquialisms, a
Mm.
lot of jargon. I didn't have the professional dress. There was a lot of things that I needed to do to work on myself.
Hmm.
But I knew that if I did two things, I would be successful. Um, and this, of course, is obviously with prayer as well.
Hmm.
I'm an avid prayer. I pray several times a day, every day, as long as I can imagine from childhood.
Yeah.
Um, and that is keeping an open mind so that I can continue to develop myself. That's number one. And then number two, it was having a passion for what I wanted to do, what I wanted to become, where I wanted to go.
Mm.
Because I knew that there were two things that were going to happen in life that would pull me away from that
Hmm.
experience, and that is people and circumstances.
Mm.
People and circumstances will put you into situations where it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what sometimes we have a propensity to give up on our hopes and our dreams and where we want to go and what we want to do. And
Yeah.
but if I kept an open mind to continue to develop myself, and I kept that purpose, that passion for what I wanted to do, that I
Hmm.
would continue to take steps in the right direction. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how I operated all my life, Miles, until my father passed away.
Mm.
When my
Wow.
father passed away, we buried him in 2015. I lost all my motivation. I got stuck. I didn't want to work. I had trouble applying for jobs. it was just a really, really difficult time. You talk about depression. I never knew what depression looked like. I never knew it really existed. I would hear
Mhm.
people say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I would always, recant. Well, just do it. Just
Yeah.
do. Why is it so hard? But I never experienced what we call spiritual warfare.
Mm.
And
And
that's and
that's a
that's
good Christian term right there.
yeah, that's what I was going through, man. And I remember a colleague of mine who I hadn't spoken to in 20 years just checked up on me out of the blue, was a past employee. And she said, hey, are you all right? Something just doesn't seem right. And we got to
Mm,
talking, and she said, God has taken you to a higher level,
mm,
And she said, now don't worry. He's going to bring someone that's going to help you through this,
yeah.
a partner in this. But at the same time, when you are asked to do more, he has to prepare you,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I went through that period for several years, and it was a slow kind of progressive depression. It didn't
Mm,
start out all at once, but let me tell you what it looked like at the height of what
mhm.
it was. Congestive heart failure, hospitalized for 4 days.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, high blood pressure, pre-diabetic, high cholesterol. All of these things were a result of being quote unquote stuck.
Mm,
Not wanting to exercise, not wanting to move, not
okay.
wanting to work, not wanting to do anything.
Yeah.
What happened to me, Miles, is this: all of my motivation for my life was centered around proving something to my father.
Mm,
And when he passed, that motivation went away.
mm,
And I got quote unquote stuck. And so what I had to do was I had to find that reason, that purpose. I had to find something else to propel me. And that's where I realized that you can't use motivation to keep you going. It has to be built on purpose.
mm.
And this is
Yeah.
where the whole purpose factor comes into play and all of that. And I had to understand that as long as I tie it to what I'm convicted to,
Mm,
now I'll never lose that drive, that
yeah.
motivation, energy. And so that's where I am today.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
cool.
so I hope that kind of summed it up. I know that's kind of a long way, but that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. You mentioned several things in there. First thing I want to go back to is the whole rejection overcomer part of your origin story. I
Mm-hmm.
relate to that as well. I see myself as a rejection overcomer.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as your faith and challenges you had to deal with, um, how did that help you overcome other challenges you faced as far as leadership is concerned, especially leadership in the corporate world and from a faith-based perspective? How did that guide you?
Well, one of the things that's really interesting about me, Miles, is that I'm a very, very extremely convicted individual in my
Mm,
beliefs and my values, and that includes God. I never in my entire life have questioned God.
mm,
Never. Even though I was placed in some very difficult positions, I never questioned him. And I hear people say that all the time. Even my pastor says, oh, no, I question God when this happened. I never found myself doing that. I don't know
mm,
why. I just never did that. I just always knew that if if this is what's happening, then it's his will.
mhm,
And if this is what's happening, there's some good in it for me. I just can't see it yet.
mhm,
So I pray for discernment. I want to
mm,
understand, right? And I'll give you an example of this faith in this Christian leadership. I remember applying for a position as a director to get my own
mhm,
location 4 times before I was successful at it.
mm,
On the third time, I not only had been the number two person at that location of about 1,000 employees, I had helped to build that location from the ground up from its inception. All of the employees in that facility respected me and felt like the job was going to be mine.
mhm,
And when it didn't happen, um, I had to make a choice, right? That's rejection
Yeah.
coming in, right? And so I could either run from it and say, hey, forget it, I'm going to apply someplace else. I don't want to work here any longer.
Mm-hmm.
I could stick my head in the sand and ignore it and just like say, okay, whoever that brings on board, bring on board, I'll support them. Or I could fight it. I could say,
Yeah.
hey, this isn't right. I deserve the position, go down that road. And so the course that I chose was to stick my head in the sand,
Mm-hmm.
right? I stuck my head in the sand, but sticking my head in the sand, I still met with our senior vice president and I said, I'm going to support the person that you selected and bring it on board from another location. And I'm going to see to it that the office has the entire office has his support.
Mm-hmm.
But what I need from you and from him are the tools to help me get to that director level.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Rodney, you got it. Okay. So this guy comes on board and I support him fully. I make sure the office and the staff is behind him. And the one thing that I learned from this guy was how to navigate the political arena. Now, I knew how to lead people,
Yeah.
right? And I knew how to get results and all of that. And prior to him coming on board, I'm thinking, like, okay, what is this guy going to teach me, right? And he comes on board, and that's the one area that I needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so 5 months later, I get promoted to director and I get my own location. And this is that location that I talked about where I had 687 employees from over 50 different countries around the world. Well, one of the things that I did not share with you in that initial story was that by it being the most difficult location because of all of the languages,
Mm-hmm.
they had never won what we would call our top office
Yeah.
award at our Circle of Excellence event every quarter, right?
Yeah.
And every director who was prior to me would talk about how difficult it was to manage there. I go in there, and within 4 months, we win that award. Not only do we win it once, we won it back to back. We won it twice, 2 consecutive quarters. And the thing that was really interesting to me was this: spiritually, God didn't see fit for me to get that job at the location I was currently at because I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
You see, and this makes me emotional just thinking about it. You see, he did not just want me to get the job,
Mm.
he wanted me to be the best at it.
Mm.
And so that's why I was kept longer in that position to learn something, learn a tool that I did not have.
Yeah.
Not only did that take place, Miles, but the position that I got promoted in was closer to my family's,
Yeah.
in that particular area. I got to move back up to the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, where I spent a lot of time and had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of relatives. And so when I look back on that now, it was God's way of saying sometimes we want what we want and we pray for it, but it's not right. It's not the right thing for us.
Yeah.
And so if you're obedient, and I was obedient, I didn't run from it, didn't walk away, go apply, work someplace else. I didn't fight it.
Mm-hmm.
I embraced it.
Yeah.
I embraced it. And God saw fit to put me in a much better position, and I'll
Mm.
never forget even stepping into that role. Our senior human resources manager at the time said, you know what, Rodney, you do 2 solid years in this position, you'll be able to write your ticket.
No. Wow.
And I did. I stayed 2 solid years. And when I left that role, I ended up working offshore in South America, running a facility there
Oh,
for
that's cool,
almost two
man.
years. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, it's
So,
always interesting, uh, God has his own timing about things.
yes.
Even when you're saying that,
Yes.
it's made me think about there's this guy in the Bible, his name's Jesus, and
Hmm.
he had a dear friend pass away, Lazarus. He let him die, man. I mean, but he
Yeah.
didn't go before he get there before he died. He waited till he was dead and showed up, and then showed the whole family that I have a plan, a purpose, and my timing is right and it's right on. And when
Hmm.
you're in it, like you were at that time,
Yeah.
it's not fun being in it, and it's
No.
not time yet. I mean, I've
Right.
been there in several situations myself, but yeah, I really appreciate that you sharing that. Now, you talked about prayer a lot so far,
Mhm.
And, I look at that as one of the, faith practices. And so, you've already talked about it, something you do as a leader and part of your faith. What are
Yes.
some other practices that you, as, they're faith practices, but they also guide you as a leader right now?
Wow. Interesting question. There's a lot about my faith and my spirituality that, quite frankly, Miles, I didn't realize how closely aligned it was to the Bible. Um, Being fully transparent with you, I shared with you how spiritual I am and how faithful I am, but I wasn't an avid churchgoer.
Mm,
I just joined a church a little less than a year ago for the first
mm-hmm,
time. I got baptized for the first time a couple months ago.
mm,
Always prayed, was always spiritual, but never connected.
mm-hmm,
And it was April of last year, 2024, when I joined my first church. My wife had found this church for us to go to. She had found several we had gone to and tried them out. And I've gone to many churches over the years. I could tell you,
yeah,
living in different places, relocating to different companies. But when I went to this church, the pastor said something that was profound that day.
mm,
His message was, don't keep going back to what God called you out of. 3 times I left the corporate world to go and start my own consulting company so that
mm,
I could touch more people, more lives.
yeah,
But every time I would get lured back, the title, the fame, the money, I would get lured back. And it was almost as if God was saying, if this is what you want, if you're supposed to touch millions of people and delivering your message, you can't do that in the corporate world. You have to be
mm-hmm,
obedient, right? And so when he said that, it hit me, struck me right in my heart. And so I had to go back the following week because I had to see if that feeling was just a one time thing
yeah,
or is it something that's going to be reciprocated? Well, for like 6 weeks in a row, every week it was something that the pastor was speaking directly to me on, man. And then finally after that 6 week, they were calling for people to come up and join the church, and I just grabbed my wife's hand and like, come on, we're going, we're joining. And we ended up joining the church. And those moments touched me, just in so significant ways. And to this day, I'm still getting messages. For example, the week before last, our pastor talked about opportunities in
mm-hmm,
this new year, and they're coming. And Lord and behold, I ended up meeting with a gentleman who took me into a whole different world of working with journalists.
mm-hmm,
And I asked if he would, spend a few moments on the phone with me, walking me through, this whole process of having someone, you know, take your insight and write about it in magazines and publications and all of that.
yeah,
And he talked about it. He talked about the challenges with it, of course. And so I ended up reaching out to two journalists, Miles, two.
mm-hmm,
And within 24 hours, I had connected with one. Not only did I connect with this guy, I connected with him in a sense where he selected me as someone to write about his particular article.
mm-hmm,
Then we agreed to kind of work on a co-project together that we write together based off of our challenges in growing up, our spirituality, and how we're moving forward. And this is something that I know came out of that message from that sermon, man.
mm-hmm,
It was interesting because like I say, it was just 2 weeks ago, and then immediately, after that Sunday, midweek, I'm in contact with this guy, and then by the weekend, it's like we're agreeing to work on something. And the expectation that was initially set was, okay, these guys are busy. They'll reach out to you if they think there's something significant there. If not, then you won't hear from them. And so don't be alarmed, don't be upset
mm-hmm,
if you don't hear from anybody, and you're only connecting with two of them. So don't really expect much, right?
yeah, yeah,
But then one of the guys, we just connected.
oh,
I know that's no one but God, man.
yeah.
You know. I know
Yeah.
that's God.
Yeah. You mentioned just a minute ago about, you know, being baptized,
Hmm.
getting into a church.
Hmm.
If there's a leader out there right now and let's just say they're struggling a little bit in their faith, what advice would you give to them at this moment in time, to maybe rekindle that spark that they once had?
Yeah. We struggle in our faith with anything, Miles, when we don't understand our conviction. We have to understand how we're connected to it, how we're convicted to it.
Hmm.
And it starts with uh, uh, a belief system, right? And so we have to kind of recycle back to that. And so if I was coaching someone in that particular area, we'd have to go back to looking at examples in their life,
Hmm.
right? Of different situations of things that happen, right? And
Yeah.
we tie that to what they were convicted to or what they weren't convicted to, and maybe expose some areas on how applying that conviction
Yeah.
could move us forward, right? And a lot of times it's because we're placed in painful situations and we don't understand.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. I was coaching one of my clients earlier today, and I was talking about the whole faith thing, and I was saying that how people want to help other people, and they
Hmm.
are, let's say, their love language is acts of service, right? But you can't pour from an empty cup,
Yeah.
right? So when you're empty, you can't pour. Well, when God is stretching us, when He's expanding us, He takes us through difficult situations.
Hmm.
But once we come out on the other side of that difficult situation, if we can stay steadfast and just work through it,
Hmm.
what we will end up finding, Miles, is that our cup that we were once pouring from is now deeper and it's bigger,
Mm.
right? A lot of what I can talk about today, I couldn't talk about 7 years ago because I hadn't
Yeah.
gone through it, I hadn't experienced it. But
Yeah.
now I can help people in areas of ways of my struggles and how I overcame it because
Hmm.
God put me in certain situations to handle.
Hmm.
And so if I was coaching someone on that, um, people have a tendency to lose their faith when they're going through difficult situations. I'd have to tie them back to their conviction. We'd
Yeah.
have to look at examples of why they're feeling that way. And we have to help them understand and see that some of these situations that you thought were painful for you were actually helping you. And I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. My wife today is someone that I can't say enough about her as being a true spiritual partner.
Hmm.
At a time when I was going through a divorce um, with my previous wife, ex-wife, I didn't understand, right? We had known each other for 13 and a half years. We got married, and within 5 months of the marriage, she said, "You know what? I'm not going to relocate there. I just think we need to get a divorce and go our separate ways." I didn't see it coming, to be honest with you. And so I was praying to God, why? Like put my marriage back together, like
Yeah.
save this.
Yeah.
And then after some period of time, things didn't change, and it wasn't an abusive type of verbally abusive marriage or divorce or anything like that. We were both amicable, still having conversations and all of that. We weren't angry, but I
Hmm.
couldn't I couldn't get a reason on why this
Yeah.
new direction. And so my prayers were in phases of three. First, it went from save my marriage
Hmm.
to give me discernment. I need to understand why she's going in this direction. And then it progressed to the third phase. God, if she's not the right one, remove her so the right one can come into my life.
Yeah.
And so during that, I would say it was about a year, while we were still married, but she wanted a divorce, and we were going through those stages and steps. And then eventually, it ended,
Mhm.
and divorce got filed, it's finalized, and all of that. And I had to realize that when I was going through that situation, I said, I'm not choosing any more females, God. You choose for me. I'm
Mhm.
screwing this up. I'm making the wrong decisions. And for me, Miles, I can share with you my love language is physical touch. So I was selecting females by physical touch.
Yeah.
But it wasn't what I needed to sustain me, because I'm a very highly convicted person. What I needed was loyalty more than anything else. And so
Yeah.
during that phase, it was almost like I jumped out of the driver's seat and got in the passenger seat and said, God, Lord, please take the wheel, because I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And this was my second failed marriage.
Mm.
Second. And it was almost as if God said, okay, but two things. Number one, you need to understand yourself more so that you can have the right person in your life.
Mhm.
And number two, I want you to share this with the world as a testimony, because there are
Mhm.
people out there that are going to suffer from this, that need to hear your story, and they need to know how to get through it.
Yeah.
And I said,
Yeah.
okay, you got it. And what I learned through that process was that I needed four things: loyalty, affection, transparency, and strength. And if I
Mm.
had those four pillars, that's what I needed to move forward. And
Yeah.
so during that period, Miles, I wouldn't date anyone unless I saw those four things. And I ended up meeting my current wife at a conference. Really strange. We met at a conference out in California, and she lived in Houston, and I was living in Atlanta at
Yeah.
the time. When we met, we talked for less than 2 minutes. There was probably 1,100 people at this conference, and all my interactions with everyone was business related.
Yeah.
And we didn't speak for 4 months after that. I had probably 80 or 90 business cards from the meeting.
Mm.
Um, we didn't speak for 4 months, and it just so happened that I had posted something on management and leadership, which is my forte, on social media. And
Yeah.
out of the blue, she reaches out and she says, "Huh, where were you 10 years ago? I could have used this 10 years ago, this philosophy. This would have helped me." And we just started up a conversation over
Yeah.
social media, got on the telephone and talked. And the more we talked over the telephone, the more I started to see how loyal she was. I
Mhm.
started to see how transparent she was, and I started to see her strength and security as a woman.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the affection because, of course, I'm in Atlanta and she's in
Yeah.
Houston, right? And so we talked over the phone for 4 months. And then she said, "Hey, I think my divorce was final at this time." She said, "I think I want to come to Atlanta to visit you." And I said, "No, well, maybe I think I should come to Houston." She said, "No, no, no, let me come to Atlanta." And I knew what it was. She
Yeah.
wanted to see if I was living like I said I was living,
Yeah.
right? I was getting up, I was going to church, I was,
Mhm.
praying all the time. I was, um, trying to get my life back together. And she came, and we hit it off really well. And, a couple months later, we ended up taking an international flight together to China
Oh,
and
wow.
having the most wonderful time. And then, it's been flourishing ever since.
Oh,
But I look
that's
at that as you know, uh, me being placed in a situation to learn certain things about myself and what I needed, and how to be a better partner for the woman that's coming into my life.
Mhm.
And she had her trials and tribulations and experiences as well.
Yeah.
I won't get into that, but we are, I will say, we're beautiful partners for one another.
Mm.
We really support one another, and
That's
we're
amazing.
both avid faith goers. I think you and I had initially talked prior to this about the fasting that we did together, where
Mhm.
we,
Yeah.
we would wake up at 5 in the morning and pray and read scriptures based off of what our church had assigned to us, and we would fast all the way until from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 11 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Hmm.
That's amazing. That's an amazing
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And that's some cool stuff there. You mentioned several things, and the one thing that stood out to me, I mean, I've kind of been in your shoes in that, as far as having to go through a divorce, remarriage, all that kind of stuff,
Mm.
and coming
Hmm.
from a faith, faith point, that's not a fun road to go down for
Right.
anyone, no matter where you're at in your life,
Hmm.
whatever you believe, really and truly. But you brought up the topic of social media,
Yes.
and what's your advice to leaders navigating social media, your faith, and especially in a world where you want to be authentic and professional, but faith is not also one of those things they want you to bring into the corporate space sometimes.
Um, I'm a very convicted person,
Hmm.
and so I march to my own tune, man. And my faith, I will not waver from. There are two things about me that I am unapologetic for, and that is my faith, and that is that I'm an emotional man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm emotional. I tear up, and I don't care who says what about it. I don't care who says what about my faith. I'm going to be a believer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, social media is interesting, but it's manageable.
Yeah.
And it's manageable for me because I know who I am and I stay convicted in my values. Certain conversations I won't take part in, I won't enter in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for one, I don't have any interest in arguing with people or proving people wrong when there's cognitive dissonance involved,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they're going to see it their way no matter what. So no amount of facts that I can put out there that they're going to believe.
Yeah.
Just like some people don't believe it, they're atheists. They don't believe that there's, God.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the balance of things, for me, something as simple as the earth rotating the way that it does and revolving the way that it does and being at a temperature that it is so human and life can form and evolve and continue, right?
Mm-hmm.
My faith and my belief system says that it has to be a spiritual being for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some people you just can't convince. I'm not going to get into conversations with them over
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, as long as you stay convicted in your values and who you are, stay away from like some of the stuff that's out there, you'll be okay. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of my practice. And I have to stick to that because the one thing about social media, it's like the Wild Wild West.
Oh yeah.
Anybody that has an opinion, man, can blurt it out there and state it.
Yeah.
And the way we are raised are different. It's different at times. Who we are, our characters are different, our
Mm-hmm.
values are different. And so you might get into situations where someone doesn't believe in this, but someone believes in that. And I
Mm-hmm.
just stay away from that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have any problem communicating my truths.
Yeah.
I'm a very transparent individual.
Mm-hmm.
That's how my wife and I operate. We're very transparent. That's a part
Yeah.
of one of the values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Loyalty, affection, transparency, and strength.
Okay. Let's go.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know recently, you've got a TEDx out there, and
Mhm.
I know you worked really hard towards that, and you wore something. You talked about it on social media. What you wore for your TEDx talk, and by the way, that the link to your TEDx will be in this video for
Oh, thank
everyone
you.
listening. If they want to check that out as well, we'll provide it there for them. But tell us a little bit about that. Why did you choose to wear what you
Yeah.
wore, and how did faith play in that?
Well, I got baptized about a week and a half before my TEDx speech.
Mm,
And during the baptismal process, they said, okay, you have to bring a white T-shirt to wear under your robe that we're going to provide for you. And so, of course, I went out and I got a brand new white T-shirt,
mm-hmm,
for the event, and I got baptized in it.
mm-hmm,
And so I knew I wanted to wear a suit for my TEDx, and my wife was like, "Okay, you always wear collared shirts. That's a professional look. You're not wearing a collared shirt." And I said, "No, I think I'm just going to wear a T-shirt." And she said, "A T-shirt?" Kind of frowned up, and I said, "Yeah, I'm going to wear the T-shirt that I got baptized in." And after I said that, she saw it. I said, "Listen." it's taken me 16 years to get on the stage,
Mm,
right? I've been applying and been getting rejected, and God saw fit to in 2024 to put me on this stage the same year that I, joined the church and got baptized, got closer to Him. I want something that's sentimental
mhm,
with me when I deliver this speech, and that's one of the reasons why when I deliver it, you see so much passion in it.
mhm,
It's because the message was meaningful,
mm,
because I think it's needed in today's society where we
mhm,
have so much dissension and amongst each other and a lot of negativity going on. And,
mhm,
we look at our executive leaders, we look at our politicians, we look at a lot of people that are
yeah,
just unsavory in how they're leading. And
mhm,
so, my TEDx centers around four essential values of leadership: love, trust, honesty, and respect.
mm,
And I go through that. I explain it during the TEDx.
mhm.
You know, yeah.
That's amazing,
So
man.
yeah, yeah.
And so you did the TEDx. You wore you wore that shirt to, kind of as just a recognition of what's happening in your life, where you're at.
Hmm.
So when you get on stage and you're speaking with these groups and speaking in front of them, what role does your faith play in that, and what role is it even in the message sometimes?
My faith plays the ultimate role, Miles, because I believe so strongly in prayer and praising God for what He's given me. I am so humbly grateful for the tools that He instilled in me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those tools is charisma.
Mm,
And I define charisma as taking my message on whatever I have to articulate and putting it on a harpoon and throwing it right through the audience heart.
mm-hmm.
And so that's the goal, right? When I delivered my TEDx speech, I prayed. My goal was to deliver it in a way with passion so that people don't just hear me, they feel me. I
Mm-hmm.
want them to feel me. And I had an experience before my TEDx. I had an unfortunate conversation with one of the speakers who was very narcissistic and admitted it, told me he was narcissistic and told me that my speech was, not that good, or my
Yeah.
topic was not that good, or whatever the case may be. But I thought that that was really interesting because for a couple of moments, I started to think about this is a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And it lit a fire in me, Miles. It lit a
Mm,
fire in me. And so I started listening to inspirational music, and then I started getting into that mindset. Oh no, I gotta deliver this thing now. Oh no,
yeah.
I'm gonna come with it. Like how dare this person And so it was almost like God put me in that experience so that I could deliver it that way.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest feeling when I finished the speech. I went back and was getting the microphone removed. And one of the individuals from the audience came up to me and he whispered in my ear, he said, "That was an incredible speech." He said, "The lady sitting next to me, I heard her whisper to her friend saying, I felt every word of what he was saying."
Oh, wow.
And this guy knew nothing at all about what I had prayed for, what my goal
Yeah.
was. But inside, it was just, once again, God, you delivered. You
Mm,
delivered, you know?
yeah.
And so that's why my faith and prayer sits at the cornerstone of everything,
Mm,
because I know it works.
yeah.
I know it works.
Yeah. It's always great to see it when he shows up, you know,
Yeah. Oh man.
and, and,
Oh man.
he shows up in ways that you can't describe at times, and shows up at times when you least expect it. And,
Hmm.
so he shows up in times when you're really, really, really prepared, and shows up in times when you're not, as well. So
Yeah.
for you at the
Yeah.
same time. So, what advice would you give to young leaders out there today? Doesn't matter if they're stepping into the corporate world or if they got their big entrepreneurial dream. Um, just how should they let their faith guide them?
I say every leader, if they want to be effective, they have to be grounded in their values.
Mm-hmm.
But where do your values come from? See, my values come from my faith,
Mm.
right? So it starts with your faith, right? You
Yeah.
have to know what you believe in. If
Mm-hmm.
you know what you believe in, then you'll know what you're convicted to. If you know what you're convicted to, then you'll know what you're motivated by. If you know what
Yeah.
you're motivated by, you can convince other people to see it.
Mm.
So many times leaders step into positions and they're looking for influence. They want to jump
Yeah.
right to, because I got the title, I'm automatically granted the influence. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you are to a certain extent. People have to say or do what you say because you're in a leadership role. That's the influence. But if
Mm-hmm.
you really want to have an impact on people, understand what your faith is, understand what your values are, understand what you're motivated by,
Mm-hmm.
because those things leads to influence.
Mm.
That influence leads to outcomes or
Yeah.
positive outcomes, right?
Yeah.
But when people step to, the influence part, just looking for the outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
then, there's a couple of perceptions or things that can take place. And that is, if you remove that title, then those followers probably will not follow that leader,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's important to know exactly what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else I always say, and I have this in one of my workshops where I go through, a person's values are like a ball,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there is something that surrounds that ball, and that is their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's something that surrounds that ball, those are their actions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is usually a person's actions will fall in a straight line with their beliefs and their values. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want to really know someone or get to know someone, find out what their values are. You find out what their values are, it'll tell you what they believe,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll tell you what their actions are. Occasionally they'll try and contradict that, but it doesn't last.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's real good. So I know, are you much of a college football fan?
Yes, college football fan. I'm a professional football fan.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you noticed just this past year, I've noticed it a lot. More
Mhm.
so than years past, it seems like. Just the emphasis on faith by the various different players. Have you noticed that much at
I
all?
have, I really have. It's interesting. At the pro level, I could throw some names out there. At the college level, I could throw some names out there. Even the coaches,
Yeah.
I can throw some names out there. I think that it's a shift that's needed,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we're seeing so much. We're seeing so much on the other side, so much negativity, so much, and these people are on this platform and they have this voice, and so I think it's God's way of saying, okay, let me balance this out a little bit.
Yeah.
People need to know about me. They need to know that when you believe, when you have faith,
Mm-hmm.
when it sits at your core, you can accomplish great things,
Yeah.
and we're watching that happen.
Yeah, and it was just kind of interesting this year to watch that, and the more I paid attention to just the interviews and the players and things of that nature, I kept hearing it more and more and more.
Yeah.
And then when you get down to the national championship game, both teams doesn't matter, Ohio State, Notre Dame, they both
Hmm.
had a strong faith based among their team leadership and their coaches as well. So I just thought that was just kind of that's just been very interesting to me to
Yeah.
hear and see them speak about it and talk openly about it, their faith, and you know when you think about the future
Hmm.
and kind of your vision for your future, but also the leaders that you're hoping to touch with your speaking, your consulting as well. Um, what contribution do you see faith playing in that?
I think that faith plays a major role when it comes to contributing to our leadership if it's going to be effective.
Mm.
I think part of the problem that I'm witnessing today, and one of the reasons why I took the direction that I did with my whole TEDx speech, is that we're not seeing a lot of faith. We're not
Mhm.
seeing a lot of character values that we
Mhm.
want in our leaders. And I think that's sad,
Yeah.
um, because not only is it drumming up the core of this negative aura in our
Mhm.
society, but it's teaching young leaders that it's okay to be that way as a
Yeah.
leader. And that's one of the things that really gets at me, you know.
Mhm.
So I think it plays a major role, um, as we move forward, and it's important.
Mhm.
Without faith, Miles, I feel like we're lost.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, think about it. You mentioned the college programs, and more of them are talking about faith, right?
Mhm.
So faith is having a belief in something basically that you can't see, right?
Mhm.
You don't know it's there. You don't know, but there are countless examples of things happen,
Mhm.
right? It's kind of like the waterfall effect, where
Mm.
we can see rain coming down from the sky.
Mhm.
We can see a puddle of water on the ground from the rain.
Yeah.
We can see clouds in the sky, but what we do not see is water evaporating and going up to the clouds.
Mm.
But we know it's happening,
Mhm.
right? So I look at faith kind of like that, right? Your belief system, it happens in the direction that you take it in.
Mhm.
Because the mind doesn't go anywhere that the body doesn't go first. Think about the
Mhm.
shirt that you're wearing today and the shirt that I
Yeah.
have on today. Before
Yep.
we put it on, we thought about it.
Yep.
The mind goes there first.
Mhm.
And so faith is just a belief system in something that we cannot see.
Mm.
But it does not mean that it's not happening. And so
Yeah.
for me, when I look at faith in the Lord, it's
Yeah.
right. My faith in the Lord, I
Yeah.
don't have to I don't have to physically see him.
Mhm.
I can look at how everything is in orbit. Everything is happening for certain reasons. I can look at
Yeah.
different things that transpired in my life where it might not have looked so good to anyone else, but after they saw the final outcome, they were like, "Wow, we couldn't believe it."
Mhm.
When I was growing up, Miles, I got relatives that were used to make jokes of me, working in the corporate world, not making that much money, and
Mhm.
they were working in plants and making way more money, and they would, oh, look at him, and it's funny because they never thought I would amount to what I've amounted to today.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I had faith and
Yeah.
I prayed,
Yeah.
right, and God gave me the steps along the way to take.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were just talking about that, there's a book in the Bible called Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1.
Yeah.
You know, it says, "Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." And that's
Hmm.
uh, it's it's so interesting that we've talked a lot about this topic, and so much of a journey is deeply personal, but it's also deeply communal.
Yeah.
As in, we grow personally, individually, but we also grow in community. And maybe this, kind of close it out just on a community basis.
Hmm.
Where have you seen faith and your faith grow when you've been in community with others?
The best place, I would say, in joining the Fort Bend Church here in
Mm-hmm.
Sugar Land, Texas, um, because it wasn't just joining a church. I attend Bible study. They have a males Bible study group, and one of the best things that came out of that was walking through this book, um, called "The Measure of a Man" by Gene
Okay.
E. Getz.
Okay.
And it's 20 attributes of a godly man. And
Okay.
so as we're walking through this book, what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of leadership principles in the Bible that
Mm-hmm.
my values were already aligned to. And so it was like, no wonder I was able to accomplish this and
Yeah.
have influence with these people, because a lot of this was closely aligned already.
Yeah.
Um, just giving an example of something as simple as being faithful to your wife,
Mhm.
you know, and talking through that with other men. How can you go in and lead an organization and not being faithful, and people in the company see that and they say,
Mhm.
this is the person that you're supposed to be the closest to,
Mhm.
and you're not faithful to them? Do I really believe you're going to be faithful to me
Yeah.
in a time of a crisis or a time of need?
Mm.
And so, you know, that's something that stuck with me. And then now it goes back to like some of the conversations I would have in the corporate world with some of the individuals and say, hey, you know, let's talk about this. I don't think that it's good to go down this particular road
Yeah.
because it could lead to X, Y, and Z. And these maybe are conversations that other leaders might shy away from, might not
Yeah.
talk to about, you know, with
Yeah.
other people in the corporate world. But I did, you know,
Yeah.
and I'd like to think that I saved some jobs because of that, you
Mm.
know,
Cool.
that I've grown people in areas where other leaders may not have grown them because they were
Mhm.
willing to talk about the tough things.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Thank you for sharing all that. That's been amazing. I really appreciate you joining us here on the Legacy Leaders Lounge. You've added
Oh,
a
it's
lot
been
of
my
value
pleasure.
as far as the faith is concerned.
Thank
Now,
you.
where could the audience find you at? So, where are some of the links, social media? Where do they connect with you
I'm
at?
I'm all over the place. I'm on LinkedIn, Rodney Lawson. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all the social media outlets. But if you want to get in contact with me, the best way to get in contact with me is bookwithrodney.com. You can book a free session with me and we can talk through your particular situation. If you're looking to be individually coached, I have a
Mm-hmm.
what I call an opulence elite coaching program
Mm-hmm.
available. I only take 6 clients at a time, and they stay in the
Mm-hmm.
program until they decide that they want to exit the program. And I've got about 2 slots left for
Oh,
that.
cool.
So,
That's great.
and then for corporations that are looking for me to come in and speak,
Mm-hmm.
again, you can reach out to me, bookwithrodney.com, and I'm willing to come in. We can talk through what you want your audience to get from
Mm-hmm.
my particular speech, and I will be more than happy to customize it and modify it to deliver for your audience.
All right, cool. Well, guys, you've heard it there. All the links to his social media, to bookwriting.com. We'll put those links in the description below so you can check them out. Check out Rodney. And also don't forget to check out his TEDx talk. The link will be in there as well. And Rodney, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And just thank you. And really look forward to seeing how God continues to use you in your work and
Absolutely.
as you continue to move forward. So thank you, man.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you, Ross.
You're welcome.